as Eli Manning stays on his feet. It is caught by
Tyree. All right, welcome to Catch the Moment podcast. This is your host, David Tyree, back for another exciting episode. This is where we get you the gems, the insight, the information, take you through your process, your pain point, your journey, get you on your road to getting great done. Today, I'm here with a friend, a dynamic entrepreneur, has some valuable insight. Tim Jackson, welcome to the couch, bro.
Thanks, David. Absolute pleasure to be here.
Just by virtue of tradition, always like to get, these are more for me than anybody else, even though this show is supposed to be about you. Where were you the first time you ever saw the helmet catch? Your thoughts, any memory? Did you hate it? Did you love it? Have you even seen it?
So I love that question because I tell that story more times than you realize. 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, I was working in, I think it was East Orange. I think I was in like a library or some sort of municipal building. Mm-hmm. And I met this older gentleman and was talking with him and probably talking about the Super Bowl. And he turns to me and he goes, "Yeah, my son is actually playing in the Super Bowl." I was like, oh, who's your son? And he rattles off David Tyree, and I'll tell you, I had no idea who you were. I was born and raised a Pittsburgh Steeler fan, okay. But
can't argue.
You take note when someone says, "Oh yeah, my kid plays football," and I don't know if you could tell, but I'm not necessarily built for football.
You got the look, bro. I'm just saying, you're looking pretty good.
I appreciate it. In any event, 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in my buddy Scott's basement with everyone on my fantasy football team and our significant others, and the game was obviously incredibly intense. And as much as I wasn't a New York Giant fan, like everyone else who wasn't a Patriots fan, we all became Giant fans that day.
The world was against the Patriots, I think, at that point, bro.
My goodness. I grew up in love with Franco Harris's catch, which I'm sure is compared to yours.
Yeah, that's number one on the top 100.
Yeah.
It's still the Immaculate Reception.
Yeah, I mean, if you go Super Bowl catch, though, it's tough to find anything that's going to compare.
Yeah, I don't think there's any debate for Super Bowl, but yeah, we got some debating.
Yeah. I talked about that catch a lot afterwards. As you know, I'm in recovery. I just celebrated 17 years in recovery.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
Amazing.
I run into a lot of young men, who are struggling, right? Sure. And often I would hear someone come into a 12-step meeting and mention the fact that they had almost drank the night before or almost got high the night before. Mm. And I would go to that catch time and time again. Mm. I would recant the story of like, hey, man, that game, the Giants weren't supposed to win. The Giants were not winning.
Yeah.
And they almost didn't win.
Big fact.
But David Tyree caught that ball, and they became the NFL Super Bowl champions, and that's what, entering recovery is. Mm-hmm. It's just wins and losses, and if you get really close to failing, but you succeed, they only count the wins, man.
They only count the wins.
And so for me, that catch has meant a lot. It was really, really awesome to see.
Man, thanks for sharing that story. The fact that you actually met my dad 2 weeks ahead is pretty eerie. I never heard that.
Yeah.
And just for full context, I love this dude. And everybody's got crazy stories over the last 3 years, overcoming COVID. But when you open a business, and of course we're going to talk about some of your marketplace journey, business journey, and I feel like now I'm on the other side of being a business owner in the entrepreneurial phase. But at that stage, 2020, in the middle of COVID, we don't know what the heck we're doing. We feel good about it, but we don't know what the heck we're doing. So when you have familiar faces, and this guy right here was one of the familiar faces in our store, and a time where there were question marks and unknowns. So the fact that, man, you actually heard of me, knew a little bit about me even before the helmet catch, before at the time we were doing business as a Clean Juice. Man, you're a rock star. Rock star in my mind, because it was familiar faces that got us through, that made us feel like, man, there's hope. And so appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty interesting too, just in meeting you, because you weren't a familiar face to me.
Yeah.
Right? I thought that I was visiting a small black-owned business and supporting a small family-owned business in Morristown, right? And I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed our conversation, and I think your wife told me to follow you on it, follow Clean Juice on Instagram at that time, now Tyree's Table. And I don't know, maybe a week goes by, and I see D Tyree 78. Is that what your handle
85,
was?
D Tyree 85 on the gram.
And I start clicking. I'm like, how is that not David Tyree? And then I come into the Clean Juice the next day, and you're sitting there like you usually were in the morning. I was like, are you David Tyree?
Yeah, bro. I mean, anyone who's met me knows that I don't really have a celebrity pulse or it's great to have access, but you just got to be a real dude. And I always appreciate people who are just real, authentic people. And it's great, some celebrities, they're normal people.
Well, I got to believe you get fanboyed every now and then, right?
Every now and then.
How does that make you feel?
Understanding where sports is in society, you definitely appreciate it, and then you're waiting for the landing, right? It's kind of like you're waiting for the landing of, all right, 1, 2, 3. At what point with this we're going to become a normal conversation?
Yeah.
But you get it. You totally get it, because being an NFL athlete and all that other stuff and accomplishing something significant, it means a lot. That's the reason why I still celebrate the helmet catches, because that meant so much for so many different people in different ways. It's crazy. Yeah. The stories I've gotten through the years are crazy. So, but even with you, bro. So, like, number one, you talked about being in recovery, 17 years. I have you know that I'm a spiritual man, I'm a Christian dude, but I'm 20 years. I'm talking about I was a functional alcoholic. So let's get into life and the journey. And I think it sounds like you're at a full circle moment when you open Awakening Treatment Center. But 17 years overcoming alcohol, substance abuse, whatever language you helped me. I have a similar 14 to 24. I'm pretty much a blackout artist, especially through my college years.
Yeah.
I'm wild for the night. I'm down for whatever.
It's good ages to have too much fun.
Yeah. Wait, good. And like I said, there's a normalization, and then there's the reality of this is really not healthy, right? So I think I'm kind of understanding, but at the same time, man, this is a great way to ruin your life. So, in light of you having this full circle, what led down the path that where you eventually found out you were in a dark place, and what was the moment where you're like, man, I need to get a hold on my life, who I am, and what I'm becoming?
I've never met anyone who came in soaring on the wings of victory into recovery.
It's real, because we understand whatever is legal is permissible, but we know that whatever is legal is not beneficial and profitable. So it's a weird space where sometimes we celebrate alcohol, we celebrate marijuana, we celebrate substances, and they're now not legal. So, but at the same time, there's the back end of it and the undercurrent of it. So you see it firsthand now on different levels, experiential, and now in service too. So just talk about your experience and how it led there, and what was that moment, because I can remember mine, knowing I needed help.
There was a time when I was 17 years old, and I didn't get sober till I was 29. But there was a time when I was 17 years old, and I just started getting high for a year or two, right? But I was walking out the door to go meet a couple of buddies, and I remember thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. And then the thought occurred to me, I probably couldn't stop it if I wanted to. From that time on, it was always, I think when I got sober, one of my mentors turned to me and said, Tim, I'm going to make this easy for you. What I want you to do is I want you to listen to that voice in your head. And then he goes, the voice that just said, what voice? He goes, that voice. Start listening to that. and the fact of the matter is, for my entire life, I was not listening to that voice.
That voice.
And so It wasn't the worst drunk. It wasn't the worst night of my life. I mean, I lived in Morristown nice. When I was young, and they had the St. Patrick's Day parade. Have you seen that?
Every single year.
I was arrested on St. Patrick's Day 3 years in a row.
Woo.
Which is difficult to do.
Yeah, that's pretty. I was going to say, that's impressive. Consistent.
DUIs, public intoxication, I certainly had a checkered past.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really just waking up one morning and realizing that I was not who I was supposed to be.
Mm. Now, was it something in your family? Like for me, my mom would buy my alcohol in high school. What normalized these substances, and was it just alcohol? Was it marijuana?
I think it was 80s and 90s. I think it was the 80s and 90s. You
never lied, buddy. Scarface. It was all kinds.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is, and I'm encouraged by young people constantly, right? And
sure.
I think that I agree with the people who say that in 10 or 20 years from now, people are going to look at booze the same way that we look at cigarettes. I think that there is a movement towards healthy living, healthy lifestyles, being spiritually fit, being centered inside of yourself.
Absolutely.
And putting poison into your system just, it doesn't benefit anybody. They've already come out and discovered that, all of those studies that came out that said you should have a glass or two of wine a day, right?
I've heard.
Is complete bullshit.
Thank you.
And just take a look at where those studies were coming from, and it becomes incredibly obvious. The medical estimation that I last heard was that the average man should not have more than 2 drinks a week.
Wow.
For the record, I'm probably more pro the other substances than I am alcohol, right? Like it's an incredibly toxic substance.
It is.
I'm for legalization of all substances. We've seen it been done in specific cities. It's being done in other countries with incredibly positive results.
Give me some of the substances that this is just for clarity and understanding. What are you for that we haven't legalized yet?
The legalization of marijuana just makes complete sense.
Gotcha.
The way in which that's been used to destroy communities and families
we're here.
is absolutely abhorrent. And the idea of just saying no is... we needed to come up with a better saying.
We sure did.
When I was a kid, we had DARE used to come in to...
I remember DARE.
Yeah, and the thing was, people will do things because they say and feel good, but not take a look at the evidence. And what they found after the DARE program was coming in was that there was an increase of substance use after DARE had come in. I remember DARE coming and looking at the table and asking the police, oh, what's that? Oh, wait, I think I know what that is.
This is a real thing in parenting. We talk about, I'm sure, just in general, we talk about protective mechanisms, and schools have been actually the gateway to introduce more destructive behaviors through the years, and especially through our years, actually even more so now, meaning and it's a big argument, whether it's from an education standpoint, health and safety standpoint, substance abuse standpoint, sex standpoint. It's like these are the big, when is it the best time to introduce certain things to a young kid? That's all over the place. But I'm a pivot. So you obviously come to this moment of understanding that there was greater purpose, but I'm imagining by this time at 29, 30 years old, you're making your way in your financial services. So you've been in financial services. What was your drive from a standpoint of being successful? Like when we think about finding success in any particular marketplace, what was your drive? And what were some of the attributes that you felt, kind of paved the pathway for you to find success in what you did in the financial services?
I'd also take note that 3 months before I quit drinking, I was working for Wells Fargo at the time, and they put me on a performance improvement plan, which is basically them lining up to make sure they don't get sued when they fire me. And put the plug in the jug, and 6 months later, I was performing at number 3 in the state, inside of my division, and then... So
they slapped you on the wrist, and you figured it out?
I quit drinking.
Wow, that was the secret
that was the difference. Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah,
get the poison out your soul, folks.
It became easy to show up to work on time.
Yep.
Right. However, initially, when I put the plug in the jug, David, I didn't really get down to causes and conditions. I didn't get down to the reasons why I felt that it was necessary to poison myself in order to be able to function on a daily basis.
You can get to the root.
So, it took about a year and a half of me struggling until I started to do what a lot of people will call the work, really taking a look at myself and who I was and what made me tick. And during that year and a half, I feel like I got worse, not better. Work got better.
Yeah.
But my sanity, my happiness, my ability to be able to function throughout the day and maintain relationships was certainly suffering. You asked me about substances before. I rarely did cocaine. The problem was every time I would do it, I was just waiting for when is my turn to talk.
Wow.
And like you'd be telling a story, and I couldn't even listen. Wait, that happened to me. When I quit drinking, it did nothing for that year and a half. I was so obsessed with myself that I didn't have an opportunity to be able to develop relationships. I was just constantly thinking about who I was and what happened to me, and anything bad that had ever happened in my life was happening again and again in my head.
You just said something so key right there, that self-obsession actually makes us more maniacal. And I think it's number one condition, because everyone, of course, is seeking a measure of happiness. And I think more than happiness, people want to be at peace, right? Like there's a place of contentment that people want to find, whereas happiness comes and goes. The human condition reveals something to us. There's there's a proper response to everything. Hopefully I have the emotional stability to find what that proper response is, whether it's crying, being overjoyed, right? But being able to return toward a place of confidence. So when you said, man, I'm thinking of myself so much, I wasn't able to focus on what actually brings. Go into that a little further, because you started talking about relationships, right? It's like what we were created for. And like, what was the process of that where you felt like you got to the other side of that and got that, like, this is the aha moment. This is what I've been looking for.
I went through a 12-step program that many people are probably familiar with. And so it was twofold, right? One was the process of writing down who I was, who I was resentful at, what was my conduct, who had I harmed in the past, what was my sex conduct, what are all of my fears, and how are they keeping me from achieving who and what I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And there's magic that happens between the pen and the paper. Right, because I think one thing, and then I write it down, right? I thought my father abandoned me as a kid, and I write it down, and I think, well, that doesn't really sound right.
So,
and then I relay this information to another man. I cover who I was.
Yeah.
Sort of as a form of confession almost,
absolutely.
right?
As confession, yeah.
And in going through it, this man who cared enough to listen to my story and to evaluate, why I was so unhappy. He says, so when you say your dad abandoned you, did he not call? I said, no. He would call often. Mm-hmm. Oh, did he move away? No. He moved out of the house. They got divorced, but he stayed in town. Mm. Oh, so he didn't celebrate for Christmas for you, or he didn't contact you on your birthday. No, he did all of that. He'd send cards, and I would push him away over and over again. Mm. And what that man told me is that I needed to put the word perceived into any one of my resentments against people. Oh. The fact of the matter is, my dad tried his damnedest to be the best father he absolutely could, and I did nothing but make that difficult for him. Wow,
man, it's so powerful that you said it. My dad. You've seen it enough through the years. He works at Tyree's table. And, I grew up in a divorce home. So, and my dad had always been amazing. We always had a good relationship. But there was this underlying root of bitterness that would kind of project.
Yep.
Right. And, of course, I'm his guy. I'm out here doing the sports thing, checking boxes. And it wasn't until I got to this place, maybe at like 30 years old, I'm like free. I'm a new creation. I didn't have the 12-step program. Like, God literally took the taste of alcohol out of my mouth. But I started to ask my dad different questions, and I learned more about his relationship with my mom. And then I realized this guy's a hero. He's far from perfect.
Yeah.
But he did his best. I think when you talk about getting to healing moments, especially in parental relationships or significant relationships, it's not just the empathy, it's the consideration and what we perceive about ourselves and other people that really breaks that threshold, and you can really begin to heal. And from now, he's my hero. I'm like, man, you did your best, dude. Yeah. And I always loved him. So what? It's powerful.
So my experience is very similar, David.
Awesome.
As you know, once I had all of that down on paper, I was instructed to go out to the people that I had harmed.
Yeah.
I was instructed to go and speak to the people who I held resentments against. So I set up a meeting with my dad, and we had started to rekindle the relationship as best we could. But I told him, listen, I need to have a very serious conversation with you.
Yep.
For my benefit.
No doubt.
I listed the things and the ways in which I had harmed him. And then I was to ask him if I left anything out and insist that he let me know how I may have hurt him.
Sure.
And, he loved me enough to explain some of the things that I had even forgotten, the way in which I tried to purposely cause harm to him.
Yeah.
And then I was to ask him how it made him feel.
Yeah.
And, I'll never forget, I sat at his kitchen table with my stepmom, who had walked into the other room, and with tears in his eyes, he explained to me, how incredibly important I was to him, and how difficult it was. But I didn't even have to ask the third question, which was, how can I make it up, right? He said, Tim, just do me a favor and stay sober and stay in my life.
Wow.
And, it's real easy. Just like you call your dad your hero. I mean, my dad is my best friend.
Amazing. Man, thanks for sharing that. That's super deep and intimate, but it gives a lot of shape to who you are and what you're doing today. Currently the CEO of Absolute Awakenings Treatment Center in Denville, New Jersey. Talk to me about the transition from financial services to being a boss, bro. Like, all right, so I'm in that stage where even me, people know I get a lot of excitement about potentially working with people at different levels, but I mean, running your own business is a monster. And of course, from a capital standpoint, what was the transition like, and what was the biggest difficulty of bringing a vision to fruition?
So there's a lot that went into it, right? And I'd be remiss, if I don't point out the fact that
Go for it.
Through my successes in the financial services field, there was a time where things were not going very well. And my son, my second child, was just born. Expenses were starting to pile up. We had purchased a house like the day before 2008 happened with that crash.
Oh, man.
And, I just felt myself pinched from every side. And the day before my 40th birthday, I claimed bankruptcy.
Ooh. That B word. I'll try to avoid.
It was, I felt my world crushing down around me, and it really, it really does something. I certainly took a lot of pride in being somebody who doesn't need to ask for help, and being someone who pays their debts, right? And there was so much that went into that, and so much, it was a humbling experience, to say the least. Man.
Sometimes we don't want to acknowledge that humility often is associated with humiliation. It's one of my favorite things. So everybody wants to be humble, but no one wants to be humiliated.
Yeah. So it gave me a little bit of a new lease on life, but at the same time, I started to realize that there was no company in the world who was going to ever allow me to make enough money to be able to be financially independent.
Big facts.
It felt like they were giving me just enough to make sure that I wouldn't leave. And
those breadcrumbs got bigger, huh?
Yeah. And so, part of it was out of necessity.
Sure.
The other part was, the opioid epidemic was getting worse and worse, and I was, we were all losing friends left and right in the recovery community. There were treatment centers who were coming into New Jersey and opening up, and relative to the services that were being provided, I was taking a look at it, and I met a couple of people inside of the industry, and I was like, wait a minute, if they can do it, why not me?
Why not me?
So we opened Absolute Awakenings. I have two other friends who are in recovery. We were hanging out after a 12-step meeting at the diner, like we would normally do on a Saturday night, and my partner Cheryl, who worked in the treatment industry, was talking to my other partner Tyler and said, I think we should open a rehab. And they immediately turned to me and said, Tim, do you think we could do it? And the next day we sat down, we submitted an application.
Amazing.
Took about 18 months for the state of New Jersey to process our application, to go through what you have to go through with the towns, and then the state of New Jersey issued us a license the day New Jersey went into shelter in place.
That's what we gotta lean in here. So this is right around COVID, right?
This is March 20th, 2020.
Amazing. So, and obviously that's kind of where some of our interactions begin that summer. But so I'm amazed and intrigued, because people, when you consider CEO, entrepreneur, I think everybody lights up with the prospect of ownership. But obviously, when you talk about the unknowns and the severity of moving pieces, what do you feel like your greatest strengths were that allowed you to, amongst your peers and supporters, investors, and what did you feel like you had to supplement, right? So we talk about being a business owner, entrepreneur, a CEO, you have to find the proper pieces to bring a vision together. What was your guiding light in relation to your leadership element, your gifts or strengths, and what did you know that you needed to establish this business and bring stability in a crazy time?
Yeah, I mean, it was all kind of crazy, right? Because with very little resources myself, even to open, we had to go out and raise $1 million.
Oh gosh!
So just in doing that alone was, asking people for favors and telling them to believe in me, and, putting together a solid business plan with a mission behind it, because everyone on our advisory board, 50% are people in recovery, and the other 50% have an immediate family member who is in recovery.
Amazing. There it is.
So,
key.
Yeah, making sure that our mission was first and foremost was something that was always key on my mind.
Awesome.
Relative to COVID coming down, the fact of the matter is I sat there with my two business partners and I said, I think we should delay. I think we should wait. And, they're 14 years younger than me.
Yeah.
They didn't have children at the time, and they, had that nice young prefrontal cortex that was like, nah, we can do it. and so, that was probably one of the first votes that I had lost.
Wow.
And we opened up. Our plan was to have 6 patients the first month, 8 patients the next, 10 patients the following, and we'd created a business plan off of 24 patients.
Sure.
And by the end of the first month, we had 24 patients.
Whoa.
It was insane if you could think about, what that time was, right? We have a brand new treatment center.
Yeah.
We have a plethora of investors who were incredibly confident that they had just kissed all of their money goodbye.
And for understandable reasons in light of where the world economy is, right?
Yeah.
Like in some way.
Yeah, we were opening up sober living houses in conjunction with our treatment center in areas where I'm not sure if you're familiar with NIMBY, not in my backyard. There's plenty of people who want recovery to happen. They just don't want it to happen in their neighborhood.
Wow, look at that.
So we fought plenty of that.
That's so heartbreaking to hear. I just keep that thought. I was just talking to somebody the same way. Of course they had a spiritual element to their service, but in Patterson, as we anyone from New Jersey understands the economic conditions there. They just didn't want them doing such a great service in their neighborhood. And I'm like amazing. The needs there on a ginormous level.
Yeah.
But just don't want you here doing this and doing this good work here, ruffling our bushes, perhaps. So sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and meanwhile, people will complain about a treatment center or a sober living coming into their neighborhood, but if you open up a liquor store, there's no problem.
No problem. That's actually the real reason. And actually, they can't wait to get the liquor store. It's amazing. And to me, like I said, as a spiritual man, I said, man, you can tell the idols of any land is just because businesses are almost like temples. Like we can't get enough food places, we can't get enough liquor stores, we can't get. And I said the next thing will be, there's a dollar behind it, right? Like at the end of the day, there's a dollar behind it. Not really looking for the real solutions, because behind it, somebody's gonna need a treatment for their sickness.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you guys are part of the solution more than the problem. Let me highlight the realities, right? So when I was kind of reading through some of you weren't just a dude in the financial industry. You sat amongst, you were celebrated, and now you find yourself in this new space, and even in the midst of a world crisis, Awakenings gets off to a respectably astounding start. Was that fearful? Like, was that like exciting? What was that feeling, knowing that, wow, this is actually more than what I bargained for, maybe?
So the result of opening during that time period with that large of an influx of patients was, a little bit of controlled chaos. It was difficult to hire people during that time period. Yeah. We'd spend, 3 weeks vetting someone. Then once we decided we were going to hire them, it'd be 6 weeks for the background checks and what have you. In order to get a counselor into the program, the counselor would then come in, and understandably so, they'd say I can't get them to keep their masks below their nose, throughout the day. And I understand their concern for it, right? I'm not a COVID denier. I'll tell you, it made it incredibly hard to go through all of that, and 3 days later have the counselor quit.
This is the underbelly. So when we talk about catch the moment, we're talking about the pain points, the process, the journey. This is the reason why people need to understand what it takes, because we have to define success for ourselves, right? Like, so it's this that makes someone like yourself and Absolute Awakenings a worthwhile, dynamic story to me. I'm like, you don't realize the price that they had to pay to bring this to market. Who are the people in your personal circle, whether it's, like I said, in the business, outside of the business, that keep you sharp?
So we talked about my dad being my best friend, right? Awesome. He's a man that if I picked up the phone and called him right now, he's in his 70s, so sometimes he sounds like he's surprised. Hello? Dad, you just answered the phone. I'm here. But, he from a standpoint of wisdom, he does a really, really good job of helping me to remain calm.
It's awesome.
That, and then I've got other friends in recovery. My high school best friend and college roommate happens to be in recovery 2 years longer than I was. And in fact, the craziest thing, he's recently got divorced and started dating the woman he loved in college, who happened to be my high school sweetheart.
Oh gosh.
So I literally, 2 months ago. He's a huge Giant fan, right? He's very excited for me to be here today. Over the summer, I'm sitting there with the two of them and their children and my children, and it was really incredible. They were all sitting around the pool and playing the guitar. I just turned to him and I'm like, man, it's been 25 years. We used to do this.
Wow.
But the roles were reversed.
Yeah.
He's absolutely been a rock for me.
That's awesome.
Throughout this entire process, and sort of making sure that I stay focused on who I am and what do I want to be.
What's one of my keynotes? Be well, do well. Like at the end of the day, we focus, we know what the human doing, but we are measured by what we do. So it's very, even in business, you have to get down to some data, some numbers, projections. You got to get to a point of being profitable. But so if you're not intentional about who you're becoming, it's very easy to get lost, especially a little bit more as a man, just because we're tied to work. Worth is tied to work.
Too much, I think.
Yeah. I think it's very easy. I think it's practical, but it's easy to swing the pendulum to an unhealthy space.
Yeah.
And I think we all up against it. In relation to your personal life, like obviously you're a father. What is your defining moment as a professional in your world where you find your greatest place of peace, joy, and contentment as you move toward your this space in your professional career?
Absolute Awakenings as a whole feels like a miracle, right? It feels like sometimes I'm absolutely in a pinch me moment where I'm like, how is this possible? At this point, we just had an advisory board call last night, and we opened up a mental health track in addition to the substance use, and we're serving. We've got 89 patients at this point. There's been over 1,000 people who have been through our program, and there's more people who need services.
Yeah.
And so, I've been looking at expansion, and when I look at other opportunities out there, it is the complete understanding that absolutely anything is possible.
And in this space, obviously, the needs are great, from opioid crisis. I've been so disconnected, and I have one of those, I have a lot of empathy toward the community because, again, I was 10 years going hard. Mm-hmm. I couldn't identify with the depth, but I know what the 12-step program is or represents. I know its history, its undercurrents, it's dynamic. You talk about confession, community. That's what every human actually needs on a daily basis, period. It's not whether you have an addiction.
Yeah.
It's what we need as humans to thrive. And when we find ourselves, out of sync with who you were created to be, there is a process to redemption, a process to restoration. So I so identify with it, although I didn't go through those steps. So what do you think is unique in your service? And take the time to just go through some of those services. But what is unique in relation to what you have been able to establish with Absolute Awakenings? What's your footprint that you're hoping to leave? And even in this, talk about, not that you're looking to be known or seen or be great. I don't get that from you. But what do you hope to leave in your legacy as a man? Because this is going to be a part of your legacy in contributing to the welfare of so many people who are struggling to overcome things in life.
And you're following a track that goes on in my mind constantly, which is, what will my legacy be? Mm. And I don't know that it's more important than it should be. It just seems to be incredibly important for me. Is that I want to make sure, before my grandfather died, he turned to me and he said, Timmy, anytime you enter a room, your job in that room is to leave it better than the way you found it.
Oh.
And I've
Sounds
taken
like a man. That's what I'm talking about.
It's something that I fail to do as often as I'd like to, and yet I understand the human condition, and I've certainly forgiven myself for who I am, but it's a nice goal to think of, what can we do to help people?
Yeah.
For a while, I was traveling the country doing youth motivational speaking, and my entire keynote was the benefits of helping other people. Huge. So I started to live it, and it was a part of my recovery process, right? There were some people that I had harmed that I couldn't ever make up, that didn't exist anymore. There were companies that I had just, there was just damage that I couldn't repair. Yep. And so my mentor turned to me and he said, Tim, what I need you to do is anytime someone asks for help, I need the answer to be yes until you have no more time.
So good.
And the result of doing that created the most abundant life that I ever thought I could have.
Oh, there's a little proverb says, all the promises are yes and amen. And yes is to agree. Amen. It declares that it is so. So it actually, it's, like I said, it's all scripture, but at the end of the day, it brings a divine element when we say yes, because we're in service to.
Yeah, and so the thing about doing all of that was that it made me feel good, and it helped me realize, what do I want my legacy to be, which absolutely is helping people. Recently I've been doing a lot of traveling down to South America. So I've been to Costa Rica, nice. A little bit all over Colombia, nice. Mexico, particularly, one of the people I met down in Colombia was this taxi cab driver, Joshua. He had been working as a taxi cab driver for 4 years. He had saved up $1,500 in an effort to go ahead and start his own business. I asked him, what does it take to be able to do that? And he's like, well, I just need my own car, and then I can do it. And he said, I think I need about another $2,500. I did some math and started talking to him about what his business plan should be, and that it should include some advertising, what have you. And I figured it was $3,500.
Sure.
I said, what would be the difference in your life? And he said, well, Tim, I make $25 a day doing this, and you just paid $400 to go all over. I mean, he took me paragliding and ziplining and what have you. So there were other people to be paid. But when I did the math, I'm like, man, there's probably $275 a day in profit to be made for the guy who's hired you. Why aren't you doing that? I said, Tim, I just don't have the resources.
Sure.
So, one of the things I plan on doing when my life relaxes a little bit, perhaps when my children graduate high school, would be to go down and find Joshuas who need these, sort of microloans.
Yeah, microloans, yeah. And can change their lives forever.
Because when I said, why do you need it? He goes, my daughter, Tim. He goes, I got a 4-year-old daughter, and everything that I do in my life is for my daughter, and I need to make sure that I can put her in a safe environment so that she can thrive. And
that's the story. That's the why.
It's things like that I think anyone who gets ahead, I think that there's a responsibility to go ahead and give back. And that's what I hope my legacy is.
Man, well, you're well on your way. Like I said, I knew this would be a good time, because when these talks are really about how are we reframing success, right? It's really about everybody's gonna have a moment, but you have to align your life, your thoughts, and create vision for your life that actually begins to identify from within, where there's meaning to your mission, right? And that's what's so valuable about your story. And man, I just can't thank you enough for the transparency. Tell us a little bit more about where we can find you, Absolute Awakenings, and what to expect moving forward for let you off the hook.
Absolute Awakenings Treatment Center is located in Denville, New Jersey. You go to absoluteawakenings.com, and you're gonna find our program. You'll find that we happen to have some of the most amazing staff.
Amazing.
Their dedication towards our clients. Last night we had a client come on our advisory board call in order to explain, what her process was and where she was today. And on the call was one of our counselors and executive director. And when the client explained that she got her children back, she got her husband back, that she was a member of the community again, to look at the look of satisfaction on Megan's face was really, really incredibly touching. And I think that goes towards the heart of the entire program, which is that everybody there wants to help someone. And we also happen to offer services that you're not necessarily going to be able to find at other treatment centers. We've got, yoga, and there's a hypnotist who comes and rocks everybody on Thursdays.
Y'all got folks hypnotized up in there?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, nobody's barking like a chicken, right? But to put yourself in a position where you can manifest greatness.
There you go. I have seen the medical side of hypnotism. I'm not a big advocate, but I do understand, the worth of putting somebody in a particular state where they can be a little bit more accessible.
I would call it more meditation.
There you go.
So prayer is talking to God, and meditation is listening.
And listening, exactly.
We have practices like those. There's Tai Chi. There's, I saw that email yesterday came through, and it just said dogs are here. right?
Nice.
Dog therapy shows up.
That's
and,
right.
And, art therapy. We give everybody a chance to find their own path of recovery.
Awesome.
Through, again, a staff that has just blown me away since we started.
Man, congratulations, man. I got to ask you one thing about this because, even me, right? It's like, you get to the point, I'm like, man, I'm out of resources. Fundraising. What is a key to raising funds, right? Like, I think most people are lacking capital, and there's so many different ways to get it. But what do you think is a good first step in that process for an emerging business owner, whether it's micro owner, whether it's bigger? Like, what is the best approach? Everybody knows they need a business plan.
I was talking to Dr. Alexandra Miller, who is a really close friend of mine, when I was thinking about doing this, and she said the most poignant thing that anyone has ever said to me when I'm like, I think I should, and I'm not really sure, and it seems like a good idea. And she said, well, Tim, if you really want to do this, you just need to simply begin. and so, it's in the doing that everything is done.
Everybody hear that 10 times over. Just start.
Relative to what worked for me was a couple of things. Number one, I made sure all of the math worked.
Come on now. There it is.
Every now and then you'll see a business open up and you're sitting in a mall and you're scratching your head going, how is that going to work? And it doesn't, because the math didn't work and nobody checked it out. I'm
sorry, because that's the practical side, right? I'm a man full of faith, but I said there's this practicality is actually spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, man. I mean, God ain't voodoo.
No.
Right? You can't
he's
just be
invisible.
Like, oh.
It doesn't mean it's not something real.
Yeah. So, having a solid business plan makes sense. And then,
right.
Raising capital for me came down to there's a book called Talk Like Ted by Carmine Gallo, which has been one of the most influential books in my life.
Nice.
And he talks about telling a story. And so the book's premise is breaking down the top 10 TED Talks, right? In 18 minutes, how are you influencing an entire crowd and having, millions of people watching your content over and over again.
Nice.
From a slide perspective, I know that people like to look at things, right? The problem is when people create PowerPoints or business plans, is they get too concerned about the numbers and they put too many words on the screen. And one of the things that they suggested in this book was to never have more than 4 words on a page and to show a lot of pictures.
Wow.
So people believed the math, but they invested in our story.
Boom, boom, boom. Tim Jackson with the jewels. That's life changing. I think that's going to really help somebody. Everybody's talking about storytelling, but comprehensively in relation to business and amplifying your business profile. It's connected to a story, right? But
absolutely.
And then the numbers have to, at the end of the day, make sense, and everyone's going to choose what they want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And thanks so much for sharing that, connecting dots, because you've been, successful. You're in the expansion phase, and I'm excited to watch that and somehow find a way to keep being apart, man. So, man, thanks so much for just rocking with your boy, man. The Catch the Moment podcast, man. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that y'all were thrilled and inspired by Tim's story. You can see he's super dynamic, authentic, engaging. He's from Jersey. But make sure you tune in to the jewels, the gems that he just dropped, not just in relation to overcoming and being a conqueror in life, but how you can be established in the marketplace with your dynamic story, how you can catch your own moments. And we'll check you next week. Make sure y'all download, subscribe, comment, like, share, and we'll continue to get great done together. Appreciate you.